We've all seen rust, right? That flaky, reddish-brown stuff that seems to attack any piece of iron left outside. But what if I told you that inside that familiar decay, there's a wild, almost sci-fi story hiding? A story that's not just about chemistry, but about life itself. You probably remember the simple recipe from science class. Iron plus oxygen plus water equals rust. And yeah, that's not wrong. But it's kind of like saying a symphony is just a bunch of sounds. The real story is so much more intricate, and in a lot of cases, it involves an invisible culprit that completely changes the game. And believe me, this isn't just a fun fact for a trivia night. The cost of metal corrosion is absolutely staggering. In developed countries, we're talking about something like 2 to 3% of the entire gross domestic product. That's not millions, not even just billions. We're talking trillions of dollars just vanishing into thin air, or, well, rust. Okay, so let's just quickly go over the classic story we all know. Rust is what we call an electrochemical process. Basically, the iron atoms on the surface are just itching to give away their electrons, especially when oxygen and water are around. This reaction, this oxidation, creates those reddish-brown iron oxides that we call rust. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, here's where that simple story just starts to crumble. You see, some of the absolute worst corrosion damage we find happens in places where there's almost no oxygen at all, what scientists call anoxic environments. So think about pipelines buried deep in the ground or steel structures at the bottom of the ocean. If oxygen is supposed to be a key ingredient, how on earth is metal getting completely devoured in places where there isn't any? The answer, it turns out, is a heck of a plot twist. Because in a lot of these cases, the main attacker isn't some simple chemical reaction. Nope, it's a biological process, driven by a hidden agent with a huge appetite for metal. The official term is microbially influenced corrosion, or just MIC for short. And what that means is that tiny, microscopic life forms aren't as bystanders, they are actively speeding up and in some cases causing the destruction of the metal all on their own. Now, there are a few different types of microbes that can do this, but researchers have zeroed in on one group in particular as the prime suspects for the worst of it. They're called sulfate-reducing bacteria, or SRBs. And these things are everywhere, from deep-sea vents to the mud at the bottom of a river. So the big question is, how do these microscopic saboteurs actually pull this off? Well, it turns out they have two very different ways of getting the job done, and both are pretty fascinating. The first method is sort of an indirect attack. The bacteria are just living their lives, eating organic stuff, and as a waste product, they release this nasty, corrosive gas called hydrogen sulfide. And that gas is what attacks the iron. It's like they're lobbing chemical grenades. But the second method, this is where it gets really mind-blowing, it's called electrical MIC. And in this case, some of these bacteria have figured out how to pull electrons directly from the iron atoms. They are literally plugging into the metal and using it as a power source to live. They are eating electricity. And this is no small thing. One key study found that while some bacteria didn't make much of a difference, these special electric bacteria, get this, accelerated the corrosion of iron by up to 71 times compared to a sterile environment. It's an unbelievably aggressive way to destroy metal. To really prove this was happening, scientists ran this just beautiful and simple experiment. They got a bunch of identical iron keys, put one in some sterile seawater, and then put another one in seawater that was full of one of these special electricity-eating SRB strains. And the results? They're just jaw-dropping. After only 9 months, the key that was swimming with the bacteria had lost over 80% of its mass. It was almost completely gone. Meanwhile, the sterile key, it sat there for over 2 years. That's 27 months, and lost less than 3%. The bacteria didn't just speed things up, they caused a level of damage that was basically impossible otherwise. Okay, so this probably has you thinking about something. Other metals, like aluminum or even copper, they form a little oxide layer on the outside that actually protects them from corroding any further. So why is rust so uniquely terrible? Why doesn't it form a protective shield? Well, the answer comes down to this really cool, elegant concept called the Pilling-Bedworth ratio. It sounds super technical, but the idea is actually incredibly simple. You just compare the volume of the rust you create to the volume of the metal you used up to make it. And that simple ratio tells you everything you need to know. It's basically a Goldilocks principle. If the ratio is less than 1, like it is for magnesium, the oxide layer is too thin, it's porous, and it doesn't protect anything. If it's between 1 and 2, like for aluminum, it's just right. It forms a tough, sealed, protective skin. But iron's ratio is over 2.
That means the rust it forms is way too bulky. It expands so much that it cracks, it peels, and it just flakes right off, leaving the metal underneath totally exposed.
And that, right there, is the crucial point. That flaking property is exactly what makes this whole microbial corrosion thing so incredibly dangerous. The rust, instead of being a shield, just falls away, constantly serving up a fresh, clean dinner plate of metal for the bacteria to keep feasting on. And this leads to these deep, nasty little holes called pits, which can cause a huge pipe or a massive structure to fail suddenly, without any warning at all.
So let's zoom back out from the microscopic world, because this isn't just a fascinating science story. This is a multi-billion-dollar war that's being fought invisibly inside our most important infrastructure. This hidden hunger for metal matters pretty much everywhere. We're talking about the oil and gas pipelines that power our world, the huge ballast tanks that keep giant ships afloat, the steel foundations holding up offshore wind farms. In all of these places, there's an invisible army of microbes constantly testing our strongest materials, putting both safety and our economy at risk. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that rust is not always what it seems. The real story isn't just about simple chemistry. It's very often about complex biology. There is a hidden world of metal-eating microbes out there, and it is having a very real and very expensive impact on our world. And that kind of leads to one last pretty wild thought. The exact same process that lets these microbes eat metal, that direct transfer of electricity, is part of a whole new field of science. So you have to wonder, if microscopic life can figure out how to devour our strongest materials, what else are these tiny, invisible engineers capable of building or breaking?